All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today we are diving deep into a fascinating textual, psychological, and theological analysis of what it truly took to survive inside Noah's Ark. We're going to unpack an incredible day-by-day breakdown from our source material that reveals hidden linguistic meanings, some seriously brilliant survival mechanics, and the visceral reality of a world tearing itself apart. So let's just jump right in.
Think about this number for a second. 370. According to the text, the 8 people aboard were trapped inside this pitch-black wooden vessel for an unfathomable 370 days. You know, we often picture a quick weekend storm, but no, this was over a year of floating on a shoreless ocean with no map, absolutely no destination, and no steering wheel.
And here's the kicker. They weren't exactly alone. While locked inside for all those months, those 8 people were solely responsible for keeping roughly 16,000 animals alive. Just imagine the sheer logistics of carrying the entire breathing population of Earth through the dark.
Now you might be wondering, what comes with 16,000 animals? Well, a staggering 12 tons of animal waste. Every single day. I mean, how did they pull that off without suffocating from the fumes or just completely collapsing from exhaustion? Well, the answers are actually hidden in the ancient text itself.
To really understand this, we need to look at the massive logistics and the hidden meanings behind the construction of the ark.
First off, the source points out that Noah wasn't just chosen because he was, a good guy. The Hebrew text uses the specific word tamim. It's the very same word the Old Testament uses later on for a sacrifice offering without blemish. This objective detail really underscores that Noah was standing entirely alone in a corrupted world, establishing an early theological connection to a sacrifice.
And the engineering? It's honestly astounding. The dimensions given to this old man on a dry plain, 300 by 50 by 30 cubits, give us a ratio of 6:1. To put that into perspective, thousands of years before modern naval architecture even existed, this exact ratio was tested by a Korean Naval Research Institute back in 1993. And guess what? They confirmed it as the ultimate, most stable shape possible for a vessel on a stormy sea.
Furthermore, the text reveals God told Noah to build kinim. Now, most translations say rooms, but the literal Hebrew translates to nests. This shows the structure was designed from the ground up not as some floating prison box, but literally as a protective womb for humanity and nature to survive a dying world.
And this womb imagery is totally cemented the night before the flood. When God shuts the door, the Hebrew word used is sagar. Interestingly, it's the exact same root used later in Scripture for the closing and opening of wombs. It clearly indicates the door was sealed entirely from the outside, far beyond human control. Noah didn't lock it, God did.
Okay, so the door is sealed. But what happens next is truly harrowing.
The source describes the flood not just as unrelenting rain, but as a violent tectonic rupture from below. The first impact would have shoved the ark completely sideways. Inside, imagine Noah's wife sitting against the wood, listening to the muffled, terrifying sounds of strangers perishing on the other side. The psychological weight of literally hearing a planet tear itself apart is just profound.
They lived in constant terror. The analysis highlights a visceral moment on day 12 when Ham noticed a leak. He touched it, tasted salt water, and immediately called his father. It prompted a desperate, silent repair in the pitch dark with pitch, absolutely knowing that if that single seam failed, the entire future of the human race and every animal aboard would just vanish.
Which brings us to a huge practical question. How did this massive floating ecosystem actually function without everyone suffocating or starving?
Remember those 12 tons of daily waste? Well, the source details a truly brilliant, closed-loop biological system. The slatted floors allowed waste to fall right into central channels, where gravity carried it down to the lowest decks, into vermicomposting pits. These pits were seeded with earthworms and dung beetles that digested the waste, multiplied, and then actually became a renewable food source for the birds and reptiles. It's like a giant biological puzzle fitting perfectly together.
And as for keeping 16,000 animals fed and watered, it wasn't a chaotic zoo. The explainer points out they survived by slipping into a natural sleep state called torpor, triggered by the enclosed darkness, which dramatically drops their metabolism. Meanwhile, the humans managed automated, gravity-fed water lines made of bamboo and stitched leather, and they sustained themselves on a meticulously stored diet, baking bread weekly just to maintain a tiny shred of normalcy.
So the physical survival mechanics are working. But the psychological toll of the prolonged silence that followed the rain, that was nearly unbearable.
Look at this timeline for a second. After the rain finally stopped, they drifted directionless for 150 grueling days. The tally marks on the wooden beams went from neat to erratic. The analysis notes a pregnant woman refusing to relight her lamp, just sitting in the dark. By day 112, Noah looks out the window to see only endless gray water. No land, and more terrifyingly, no word from God. They really started to wonder if they were just floating in a sealed tomb.
But then, right when it seems utterly hopeless, the text shifts completely. It says God remembered Noah. And the Hebrew word used here is zakar. Now, this doesn't mean God had a memory lapse and suddenly remembered they were down there. Zakar is a covenant word. It means to actively take movement on a promise. For 150 days there was silence, sure, but there wasn't absence. God was preparing to move.
This divine intervention brings a wind, the same kind of wind from creation, and sets up the final stage of their incredible survival.
After months of resting on a mountain and testing the sky with birds, Noah releases a dove, and it returns with a fresh, plucked olive leaf. Noah's wife holds it and simply utters two profound words. It grew. Because, olives don't grow underwater. It proved that long before Noah could actually see it, the world was already healing beneath the surface.
Finally, day 370 arrives. The door that God had shut from the outside is opened, and they step out. The source paints this beautiful picture. Noah's wife kneels and presses her hands into the soil, and a 17-year-old girl puts her bare feet in the grass, smiling for the first time in over a year. The survival was complete.
As they built an altar, a covenant was established with the rainbow. But the source notes something amazing. The Hebrew word used here is kesheth. It's not a decorative arch at all. It translates literally to a war bow. It represents a weapon of judgment. But notice how it is unstrung and pointed away from the earth, hanging in the clouds as a divine promise of peace.
The explainer wraps up with this striking linguistic connection regarding the word kafar. Physically, kafar was the black tar or pitch Noah used to waterproof the ark's seams. But spiritually, it shares the exact root word for atonement, as in Yom Kippur, meaning the very pitch used to save them from the water means the ark was essentially atonement-coated.
So, what does this all mean? Well, recording objectively on the source's conclusion, it links this ancient text directly to Christian theology. It views the ark not just as a historical event of physical deliverance, but as a direct, powerful foreshadowing. It presents the ark as a vessel of grace, pointing toward Jesus as the ultimate covering or atonement from judgment. Which leaves us with a truly profound and evocative question drawn straight from the source's final thought. When you look at the sheer magnitude of this survival story, the sealing of that door and the grace it represents, if that door were sealed today, which side of the wood would you be on?